Hi, I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, President Biden unveiling a $2 trillion infrastructure proposal which aims to invest in roads, water systems, and electric vehicles. Democrats say it will create jobs while promoting clean energy, while Republicans are slamming the price tag, noting funding the bill will raise the corporate tax rate to 28%. Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace discusses the proposal, the possibility of higher taxes, and concerns over the humanitarian crisis at the southern border. NASA's Perseverance rover is settling in nicely on Mars, searching for signs of ancient life on the red planet. Astrophysicist and director of New York's Hayden Planetarium, Neil deGrasse Tyson, shares his insight on the historic mission and the future of space exploration. Plus commentary from pastor and Fox News contributor Dr. Robert Jeffress. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
I'm Kennedy.
I'm Bill Hemmer.
I'm Sandra Smith, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Friday, April 2nd, 2021. I'm Chris Foster. President Biden wants to raise taxes on corporations and high earners to help pay for his infrastructure plan, the first major tax hike since 1993 if it goes through. Republicans in Congress are against it, but a new poll shows a majority of Americans are in favor of the idea.
As a practical rule, taxing other people is popular. Not taxing you is unpopular. Taxing other people is popular.
We speak with Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace.
I'm Lisa Brady. After trying times on this planet, we explore other worlds with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I cannot imagine life without space. And yeah, that includes the moon, Mars, and beyond.
And I'm Robert Jeffress. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Calling it a win for the future, President Biden and members of his cabinet are promoting his infrastructure spending plan. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg tells Fox,
good infrastructure planning is always about looking to the future. You know, railroads weren't part of infrastructure until we built them.
Republicans in Congress, like Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, argue,
this is not an infrastructure bill. As best I can tell, just being charitable, about 15% of this bill is addressed to infrastructure. The rest is climate subsidies and social welfare spending.
More than $2 trillion worth just for the part of it announced so far, with more to come.
It's awfully big. And, you know, I can understand everybody agrees there needs to be infrastructure.
Chris Wallace is the host of Fox News Sunday.
But at a certain point, and I don't know where that is, you know, you can't keep throwing trillions of dollars in government spending. And you know, we just passed a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package. Now, here's another $2 trillion plan with another $2 trillion in taxes. And the president has another multi-trillion-dollar plan that's going to be just social programs this month of April. And, you know, you just have to say at a certain point, does it make sense to be spending? I mean, even in Washington, trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in taxes and spending is a lot of money.
Yeah. This, at least, strikes me, depending on what you define as infrastructure, as having more relevant stuff in it than the COVID bill, which was clearly not completely COVID directed. This just depends on what you call infrastructure. Is childcare infrastructure? You could argue that it is.
Well, I don't know. To me, that's a social program. I mean, there are other things in this, and I'm not saying whether they're right or wrong. That's up to people to decide. But it certainly isn't a traditional view of infrastructure. I think there's $400 billion in this for care of disabled and elderly people. And I'm not saying that's not admirable or conceivably, you know, you could argue legitimate, but it really is expanding a definition of infrastructure to the breaking point. Now, I happen to think that we have defined it in too old-fashioned a term. In other words, I think infrastructure clearly goes beyond roads and bridges, things like the electrical grid, or, you know, conceivably having charging stations all around the country. You're going to have a nation which has if not a majority, certainly a large percentage of electrical vehicles by 2030, 2035. I think electrical charging stations make a lot of sense. I would call that infrastructure. child care, that's a bridge too far from me. And I didn't mean the infrastructure pun there.
Yeah, I just mean when I say you could make the argument for it, you could say that it greases the wheels for people to actually work and be productive if they have child care and care for their parents and stuff like that. Now, of course, this is going to mean yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's a perfectly legitimate argument, but I don't know how that's infrastructure. That's a social program, and, you could argue it's absolutely legitimate, but, I mean, infrastructure has traditionally meant the structure of our country.
Well, in any case, they are going to be very expensive, and it's going to mean higher taxes. I wonder if how this is. We know, of course, Republicans in Congress aren't going to dig it. I wonder if this is sellable to the American people on the basis that, look, this isn't going to be your money; it's going to be big corporations' money and rich guys' money.
Yes, I think that is very sellable. I mean, as a practical rule, taxing other people is popular. Not taxing you is unpopular. Taxing other people is popular. There was the Senator Russell Long, who was the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, used to say, "Don't tax you, don't tax me, tax that fella behind the tree." And that was basically the political argument. And taxing big corporations, and I actually see some legitimacy there. They were at 35%. Most people thought they were going to drop to 25%. Trump and the Republicans ended up dropping them to 21%, which was below even what a lot of businesses said was needed. So raising them to 28%, I can understand that. And taxing people making over $400,000, you can certainly make a case for that. So I'm not sure that the taxes are an absolute. My guess is they'll be politically popular as long as they're able to keep their promise. And it was interesting. The decision was made not to, because at one point the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, was saying, well, how about user fees? How about increasing the gas tax, or how about increasing a mileage tax? You will have a chip in your car, and if it says you've traveled 500 miles this month, you have to pay X amount of taxes, because you've used the roads. They couldn't go for that because that would have broken the president's promise that nobody making under $400,000 a year is going to be taxed. Obviously, that would have taxed a lot of people making a lot less than $400,000 a year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at some point down the road, again, no pun intended, they have to figure something out because gas taxes aren't going to pay for anything when people are using less and less gas and more electric vehicles.
That's right. On the other hand, the gas tax.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say the gas tax hasn't been raised in 20 years or so. I mean, I understand it's less popular when gas is $4 a gallon rather than $2 a gallon. But there is a perfectly legitimate rationale for raising the gas tax.
Yeah. There's talk in the administration about maybe coming up with some sort of asylum system reform. It's just not working out. You got into it a little bit with White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki on your show last week. The White House finally let reporters into one of these border facilities, and they're really, really crowded.
Yeah, and it makes the argument that the administration is making that, well, we're doing this because we're humane. We're not like the Trump administration. It makes that a much harder argument to swallow when you see the conditions inside these Border Patrol facilities. Just hundreds of kids with no space at all, sleeping under these Mylar blankets, literally right next to each other, hip to hip. It's a terrible situation, and there's just no way you can justify how the Biden administration has handled this. To have sent the signal, which they sent, whether wittingly or not, hey, if you come across the border, particularly if you're an unaccompanied minor, you're going to be able to stay in the country without having prepared for what seemed like an absolutely foreseeable crisis, strikes me as malpractice. That just no way that you can have turned on the faucet the way they did and not have been prepared for the fact that water was going to come out.
Chris, what do you make of this story involving Matt Gaetz, this Florida congressman? He's under investigation for child sex trafficking. He denies it. He says, in fact, he's being extorted, blackmailed. I can't quite get my head around it yet. Have you?
No. I mean, the answer is I don't know enough about it. I mean, I know the reports. There seem to be two investigations going on, one in which Matt Gaetz, the sex trafficking, might be a possible target, and one in which he might be a possible victim of the extortion scheme. So, I don't know, and the government isn't making, and, probably shouldn't, available the details on these, since at this point it's just investigations, there's no indictments, there's no charges. But it sure is a mess. And, Gates he's an unusual character, and he's taking unusual strategy, which is going out and telling his story to every reporter, every television show that will listen to him. I know a lot of good defense lawyers who would say, shut up. All you can do by going public in these cases is get yourself in more trouble, provide more ammunition that'll be used against you. Just remember, anything you can and say will be used against you. And, that's the danger when you're a white-collar potential defendant. The best policy is to say as little as possible.
The baseball season has started. You think you're going to get out to watch the Nationals at any point? Maybe when the shots are in your arm?
I have the shots in my arm.
Good.
I'm an old
Congratulations.
So, I would hope to. I'd love to. I got to say, it's one of the problems with us in this situation now. You've got the shots, and, it used to be, I'm old enough, I remember the polio vaccine in the 50s, that you had a green light, you had a carte blanche, your life had changed. But now, even though you've had the shots and you're fully vaccinated, you're still being told wear a mask, you're still being told social distance, except in very narrow cases with members of your family or other people who've been vaccinated. So, I don't know. Is it safe to go out to a ballpark now and watch a ball game? I don't know the answer to that. I have to say, personally, I'm a little leery about it. So, until I'm persuaded that it's fine and safe, I'm probably going to watch it on TV.
Honestly, I think I would be fine. The science basically, just logically, it seems that you're going to be fine to go to a game, that other people around you will be fine once you're vaccinated. The CDC, I think, now is leaning toward finally telling people, okay, once you're vaccinated, you're probably not going to infect other people. But I don't know how. But then you've got to have ushers at the ball game looking at your vaccination papers.
Well, I don't think that they're going to say that you have to have been vaccinated to go into the stadium. So I think there'll be some unvaccinated people there. I don't know. I mean, it's the answer is, do I feel like I'm, I have free run and I can go do anything I want? No, I don't feel it yet, even though I've been fully vaccinated. And that's, part of the problem. And they're going to have to settle this quickly, because I think, with the huge supplies we have, despite the complete mess up with 15 million doses of J&J, we're going to have enough vaccine for everybody. And then the big story is going to be, and I suspect by May it'll be the big story, is people who are unwilling or reluctant to take the vaccine. And I think what's the big key there is for people to sense, to be convinced it'll make a difference in your life. You'll be able to do things you can't do now. And until you have that, some people are going to say, why would I put this vaccine in my arm when I don't know whether or not it's going to make me safe?
Yeah, I wonder if at that point it really does just come down to your own personal choice. And if you've been vaccinated, you're not going to get sick. If you didn't, well, good luck if you're around other people who also didn't.
Yeah, well, we're not out of it now. And then, of course, you have Rochelle Walensky, the head of the CDC, this week, almost in tears, saying, I'm worried about a fourth wave. So we're not out of it yet.
Chris Wallace, host of Fox News Sunday, frequent guest here on the Fox News Rundown. Chris, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Chris.
This is Robert Jeffress with your Fox News commentary. Coming up.
It takes a lot of patience to be a scientist, but there must be nothing quite like the feeling when something you've spent years dreaming, then designing, then testing works.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the sands of past life.
There was pure pure jubilation and relief at Mission Control, in this case NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab in Southern California, as the Perseverance rover landed on Mars in February, the first rover to land in nearly a decade, and this time thanks to a multitude of cameras offering new views of both the red planet and the rover's own harrowing descent at nearly 12,000 miles per hour. The mission is scheduled to include a number of technological firsts, including a helicopter flight, a small craft named Ingenuity, carried to Mars by the rover and designed to demonstrate that a controlled, powered flight on another planet is possible. That's expected to happen later this month. Space programs are among the few things unchanged so far by the new administration in Washington. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki reiterating support this week for the National Space Council.
Provides an opportunity to generate national space policy strategies, synchronize on America's space activities at a time of unprecedented activity.
President Biden also supports the goal of landing the first woman and the next man on the moon. But for now, the world can be captivated by the latest trip to Mars.
We can't talk about Mars without giving a shout out both to China and to the United Arab Emirates, both of whom sent missions to Mars in this Mars access window.
Astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson is an author, TV host, and director of New York's Hayden Planetarium.
The Earth and Mars are configured for good travel between them only once every 26 months or so. And so within the last several months, 3 missions arrived because they all launched at about the same time to take advantage of that sort of orbital dynamics. China is sending an orbiter, a lander, and a rover. The United Arab Emirates is sending an orbiter that's going to study the Martian atmosphere to try to understand what happened. Something weird and bad happened. Well, I don't want to value judge it, but something happened to the Martian atmosphere so that it can no longer sustain liquid water on its surface. And there's so much evidence of water having been there. And now it's bone dry. What happened? And so they're going to study the atmosphere for that. We were the third to arrive with the Perseverance rover. And my favorite part of it is that it's got a helicopter. That's just badass. So it's like, rover, you're too slow for me. Let's fly around. And so it's at this stage, since it's the first sort of aviation craft ever sent to Mars. It's really an engineering demonstration. Can it work? So we're all very excited about it.
And I know they're taking some core samples and they're going to leave them there sort of hermetically sealed for a future mission to get those back to Earth, which is a whole other, realm of new technology.
It's a whole nother. And in the business, that's called a sample return. And because ideally, you want to bring Mars to Earth and put it in a laboratory. Or short of that, you bring the laboratory to Mars. And that's kind of what the rover is. But you can't bring all of the sophisticated equipment because the payload weight is highly restricted for these long journeys. So you can set up a series of missions where you decide what samples you need and want and what looks interesting. And then you can send another mission whose only job it is to bring the sample back. And so then you can streamline it for just that purpose. Because traveling in space is so expensive and so it's fraught with so many things that can go wrong. You want to tighten and sharpen what it is the thing does, because then it could do it very well.
What do you say to people who wonder why? Like, why do we need to know all this about Mars? And do you still meet people who don't believe it, don't believe we went to the moon, or that the pictures we're seeing are really from Mars, especially since they're so clear?
So there are 2 questions in there. Let me unpack them. So the first one is, what do I say to people who say, why are we doing it? I thought long and hard about that. And yes, I'm an enthusiast of science and of space and STEM fields and all of this. But I can't require in a free, pluralistic country that you also be enthusiastic about it. But what I can do is give you examples of what life might be like without such knowledge or insight or enlightenment. Or better yet, I can analogize you to someone long ago. So let's do this experiment. Let's go back 30,000 years, and we're all in a cave. We're some tribal group in a cave, all right? And you see the cave door and you open the cave. It's probably not hinged. I don't know. Okay, you go to the cave opening, okay, and you look out, and then you see this field of flowers, and then a river. You don't even have words for them because you're the first to see them. And there's a hill and trees and plants and things growing on the plants, fruit. And then you go back into the cave and say, I want to explore what's out there. And then the cave elders say, no, we have cave problems. We have to solve those first before you go outside the cave. And how absurd that is, right? Right. So here we are on this speck of dirt, third pebble from the sun called Earth. And to have people say, why are we exploring the rest of the entire universe when we have problems here on Earth that we need to solve? That feels a little short-sighted to me, especially when analogized to that same conversation that may have actually been conducted 30,000 years ago in a cave. So I cannot imagine life without space. And yeah, that includes the moon, Mars, and beyond. Now, for those who don't think we went, I've thought a lot about that too. And here's my conclusion. What a world we live in. Just think about this, where our achievements are so advanced that people walking among us are in denial of them. To me, it's a measure of how impressive the advances are. They're so impressive that some people cannot wrap their head around it. So I said, yeah. Why don't you give an applause to human ingenuity? Maybe you should be applauding rather than saying, no, it never happened. And maybe humans are just cleverer than you think we are in total.
The new administration, the Biden administration, has made it clear it supports Artemis. Spokeswoman Jen Psaki's unambiguous about that. There's still a little bit of a debate, though, about the timeline for this mission to go back to the moon. 2024, 2028, there's some funding that's an issue. But from a scientific perspective, is it better to take longer?
I don't have a strong opinion there. What holds things up is just funding and political motivation and this sort of thing. But going to the moon, we've been to the moon, so this should not hold us back. The engineering of it will not be what's holding us back. If we want to get there in 2024, 2028, I don't have a strong opinion. What I do know is when President Kennedy said, let's go to the moon, and he said that in 1961, the speech he gave, which no one requotes the rest of the speech, you only hear the good part, like, we choose to do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. We go to the moon and send a man to the moon, return him safely back to Earth before the decade is out. Mm-hmm. We hear that, but what you didn't hear in the rest of the speech is, I'm paraphrasing, but we are scared witless of the Soviet Union because they just put up a man into orbit, and we don't have a ship that hasn't blown up on the launch pad that can carry a human being, and they are our sworn enemy. They're the godless communists. And so if they were doing something better than us and we were supposed to be the leaders of the world, that looked bad. And so we had motivation beyond the charisma of a charming president. There was military motivation. So we're going back to the moon now. The timeline is not driven by fear. Unless here's what would happen if this happens. You ready? Mm-hmm. If China leaked a memo, doesn't have to be true, just have them leak a memo saying they want to put military bases on the moon. Oh my gosh, that's all we have to do. We'll be on the moon in 3 weeks.
Next year, exactly.
Sooner than that. No, we'll be there. There'll be a Starbucks. There'll be a McDonald's. So that kind of motivation really puts a flame under people's butts, and political machines that otherwise whose gears turn slowly would then be rapidly sped up.
You do have a brand new book, Cosmic Queries, Star Talk's Guide to Who We Are, How We Got Here, and Where We're Going. And that title kind of plays off your Star Talk podcast, which was an evolution of the TV show. You're tackling some mighty big questions in this one, though. Is this just something that you've been wanting to do for a long time?
Cosmic Queries is a highly successful format variation of the Star Talk podcast. But Star Talk has had many sort of media incarnations. And one version of it is called Cosmic Queries, where we solicit questions from our fan base. And if the questions are astronomical, then it's just me and my co-host. But if the topic goes separate from my expertise, we bring on someone else who is an expert. So these are fun questions, and it goes the 40 minutes of the podcast. But occasionally people ask really deep questions, and they don't lend themselves as well to the witty banter that goes on with the comedian and the topic. So we collected those, and there are 10 chapters, each emanating from a very deep question. What is it all made of? How do we know what we know? How did it all begin? Is there life elsewhere in the universe? How did life form? How will it all end? And what does nothing have to do with everything? Oh, that's chapter 10. That's a good one. And so these topics touch places where sometimes you don't even know if you're asking the right question. And if you are asking the question, you don't even know if your answer is a good one. So this is an exploration. And some of it borders on philosophical, even spiritual at times. But Cosmic Queries it's a celebration of what it is to be curious as a book.
If only we could bottle your enthusiasm. Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I'm just channeling the cosmic energy getting channeled through to this microphone.
Well, we certainly appreciate your insights as always, and we will certainly talk to you again. Thank you for spending so much time with us.
Thanks.
Fox Nation presents podcasts Women of the Bible Speak.
I'm Shannon Bream, host of Fox News at Night and author of the new book, Women of the Bible Speak, the wisdom of 16 women and their lessons for today. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, FoxNewsPodcast.com, or wherever you download your podcasts.
Rate and review the Fox News Rundown on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Robert Jeffress.
What's on your mind?
Last year's Easter celebration felt more like one unending Good Friday. The light and hope that Easter usually offered was eclipsed by the darkness and despair the disciples experienced the day that Jesus died. 1 year ago, there was widespread fear throughout the world as the first wave of the pandemic was raging. Countries were on lockdown. Churches were empty. Things were bleak. A pall was descending over the world, and we wondered if it would ever be lifted. In this last year, each of us has experienced some dark moments. We faced the very real possibility of our own mortality. At one particularly low point last year, my wife and I spent a day searching for and then purchasing our cemetery plots in case we became victims of the coronavirus. These moments give us a small glimpse into how the disciples must have felt on the darkest day in history, what we now call Good Friday. Of course, to those who were living through it, nothing about it seemed good. The motley band of disciples who had followed Jesus all across Israel for 3 years sat stunned. The one they thought might be the Messiah was gasping for air, nailed to a Roman cross. The great hopes they had for a new kingdom and an end to their suffering felt like wishful fantasies. But light shines brightest after we've been immersed in the darkness. That's how Easter 2021 has been for me. After months of drudgery, the end of the pandemic finally feels real to me. I remember how excited I was driving down the Dallas North Tollway a few months ago to get my first dose of the COVID vaccine. To my surprise, during my commute to the vaccination site, President Trump called me from Air Force One. As delighted as I was to talk with the former president, I was more focused on making sure I didn't miss out on getting to the location on time and receiving my vaccine. For me, the end of the pandemic brings some hope that I can once again experience the little things I enjoy so much. I can hug my grandkids, catch up with old friends, and visit my favorite restaurants again. This week we celebrate the single event on which eternity turns, the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. On that dark Good Friday, when the sun stopped shining and the earth trembled, God was doing something far greater than anyone could see or comprehend. By his suffering and death, Christ atoned for our sins and made the payment for sin that we deserve to pay. He was put into a tomb on Friday with mourning, but 3 days later on that Easter morning, he emerged triumphant over sin and death. God turned the darkest moment in all of history, that Good Friday when Christ died, into the brightest celebration of life-giving hope on Easter Sunday. When the world was swallowed up in darkness, God was working to make all things bright and new. The good news is that he can do that in your life as well. Whatever pain you've endured this last year, the resurrection of Jesus Christ offers the assurance that the suffering you have experienced, though very real, is also very temporary. One day, as the scripture promises, the world's curse we live under will be removed and death will be swallowed up in victory. That's the hope an empty tomb offers. This is Robert Jeffress for Fox News.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
I'm Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist, and I'm inviting you to join a new conversation with the smartest thinkers out there about the country and where we're going. Subscribe to the Ben Domenech Podcast.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.